Your concepts are subpar at best, Brandon. Whitmore chuckled, his voice reverberating through the vacant dining area I had dedicated 8 months to designing. We're taking a different approach. Clear out your office by tonight. I stood there, shocked, observing him dismiss everything I had invested my heart into with a mere flick of his hand. The restaurant was just 2 weeks away from its grand opening, and he was letting me go, the one who had crafted every detail from the concept to the menu to the marketing plan. I'm Jasmine O'Connell, 39 years old. For the last 15 years, I've worked in the hospitality sector, advancing from server to restaurant consultant to executive chef. 6 months back, I believed I had finally secured my dream role when Brandon brought me on to create the signature restaurant for his new boutique, Hotel The Sterling Rose in downtown Portland, Oregon. He had promised me creative freedom, a partnership, and my name on the door. Instead, I was left facing the ruins of my professional reputation. But Brandon, the opening is in 2 weeks, I managed to say, my voice barely steady. The staff is trained on my systems, the suppliers are arranged, and the marketing campaigns are already running with my concept. He shrugged, barely glancing at me as he scrolled through his phone. My new head chef will sort it out. Someone with actual credentials, not just small-town experience. The condescension in his tone made my stomach churn. I had dedicated months to developing a farm-to-table concept that highlighted local Oregon. Ingredients designed the entire interior to enhance the seasonal menu and trained a staff of 20 on my vision for elevated comfort food. It wasn't lost on me that everything he was claiming as mediocre, my recipes, my designs, my staff training, was precisely what he intended to utilize. What about my contract? I inquired, knowing the answer would crush me. Check Section 12. We can terminate for creative differences with 30 days' notice. You'll receive your final paycheck, but that's all. His smirk revealed that he had plotted this all along, likely waiting until I had completed all the hard work before bringing in someone he considered more prestigious. As I glanced around the dining room one last time, absorbing the warm wood, accents I had selected, the custom light fixtures that had taken weeks to procure, and the open kitchen design showcasing the culinary theater I had envisioned, I felt a shift within me. This wasn't merely about losing a job, it was about having my creative spirit pilfered and repackaged under another's name. But as I walked toward my office to gather my belongings, I noticed something that caused me to pause. The vacant storefront. Directly across the street had a for lease sign in the window, and suddenly an idea began to form. The next morning, I found myself in my small apartment kitchen, surrounded by notebooks filled with recipe tests, design sketches, and business. Plans that now felt like relics from a bygone era. Everything I had created for the Sterling Rose was legally Brandon's property, but the passion and expertise behind those creations were still mine. I had been raised in a family of restaurateurs. My grandmother managed a small Irish pub in Boston, and my mother had built a catering company from the ground up before selling it to retire. They taught me that success in this industry was not solely about food, but about crafting an experience that made people feel they belonged somewhere special. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Kelly, who worked as a food critic for Portland Monthly. Heard about Sterling Rose? That's brutal. Want to grab coffee and plot revenge? Her suggestion made me smile for the first time in 24 hours. Kelly had covered the Portland food scene for 8 years and understood the politics and personalities that could make or break a restaurant. More importantly, she recognized my work and had been enthusiastic about the Sterling Rose project since I first shared it with her over coffee at our usual spot. I keep thinking about that empty space across the street from the hotel, I confessed, stirring my latte absent-mindedly. It's the perfect size, and the rent would be a fraction of what Brandon's paying for his space. Kelly raised an eyebrow. Are you considering what I think you're considering? Maybe, I said, feeling a familiar excitement build in my chest. I had enough savings to cover startup costs for a small operation. Nothing extravagant, just great food and an atmosphere that encouraged people to linger longer than their Instagram photo sessions. You'd be going head-to-head with your former employer, Kelly pointed out, though her tone suggested she viewed this more as an opportunity than a problem. He stole my concept and fired me 2 weeks before opening. I think I can handle a little competition. As I spoke those words, I realized I genuinely meant them. Brandon had underestimated me, assuming that without his hotel's marketing budget and prime location, I couldn't possibly succeed. But he had overlooked one crucial detail. He might possess my designs and recipes now, but he had never grasped what made them special in the first place. He viewed trendy ingredients and Instagram-worthy plating, yet failed to see the heart of what I was trying to create. A place where food united people, where every dish told a story about the community and the land it came from. By the time I left that coffee shop, I wasn't merely plotting revenge. I was planning a revolution. 3 days later, I stood in the empty storefront across from the Sterling Rose, calculating square footage and envisioning possibilities. The space had once been a vintage clothing store, and the exposed brick walls and original hardwood floors provided the kind of authentic character that Brandon's polished hotel restaurant could never replicate. The previous tenant had left behind some fixtures that could be repurposed, and while the kitchen space was smaller than what I was accustomed to, it was perfectly adequate for the intimate dining experience I was beginning to envision. The landlord, an older woman named Patricia Chen, appeared skeptical when I shared my concept for a pop-up restaurant. "You want to compete with the fancy hotel across the street?" she asked, glancing through the window at the imposing facade of the Sterling Rose. "I want to offer something they can't," I replied, then detailed my vision for what I was already. Calling Bloom, a neighborhood restaurant that would completely change its menu every 6 weeks, showcasing various aspects of Oregon's agricultural seasons. Unlike the static luxury concept Brandon was implementing with my stolen designs, Bloom would be dynamic, personal, and genuinely connected to the community. Patricia's expression shifted as I spoke about collaborating with local farms, featuring guest chefs from food trucks and home kitchens, and creating an atmosphere where families could afford to celebrate special occasions without feeling intimidated by pretentious service. "How long would you need the space?" she asked. "Initially, just 3 months," I said. "If it works, we can discuss a longer lease." The truth was, I was betting everything on those 3 months. My savings would cover rent, basic equipment, and ingredients for a soft opening, but there would be no safety net if Bloom failed. My career in Portland would essentially be over. Yet as I looked across the street at workers hanging the Sterling Rose signs, I felt a determination I hadn't experienced since my grandmother first taught me how to make her famous shepherd's pie when I was 12. That afternoon, I reached out to 3 individuals. My former sous chef Carlos, who had left Sterling Rose in solidarity when he learned of my firing. My friend Margaret, who ran a small marketing agency focused on local businesses. And surprisingly, the food blogger who had been documenting Portland's restaurant scene and had already contacted me about my sudden departure from the hotel project. Each conversation exceeded my hopes. Carlos was eager to join me and had already received offers from other restaurants wanting to poach Sterling Rose's trained staff. Margaret offered to handle my marketing in exchange for equity in whatever venture I was planning, and the blogger, intrigued by the David versus Goliath narrative, wanted to document the entire process from concept to opening. By evening, I had signed a 3-month lease and put down a deposit. The Sterling Rose was set to open in 11 days, and I was giving myself 10 days to create something that would make Brandon Whitmore regret ever crossing me. The first week of building Bloom was a whirlwind of 14-hour days and pure adrenaline. While Brandon dealt with the chaos of final preparations for his grand opening across the street, I was transforming my empty space into something that felt like a blend of a farmhouse kitchen and an art gallery. Carlos and I recruited 4 other Sterling Rose employees who were dissatisfied with Brandon's management style, and together we established an efficient operation capable of serving 40 covers with the kind of attention to detail that most Portland restaurants struggled to achieve, even with double the staff. Margaret worked her magic on social media, building anticipation without revealing too much about our concept. She positioned Bloom as Portland's most exciting culinary secret, utilizing hashtags like Tao Farm Toglass and Had Seasonal Story that hinted at our philosophy without disclosing specifics. Meanwhile, I contacted every farmer, forager, and artisan food producer I had built relationships with over the past year. Most were furious about how Brandon had treated me, and several offered to supply ingredients at cost for our opening month. The Sterling Rose's grand opening was scheduled for Thursday night, with a private party for investors and media, followed by public service starting Friday. I initially planned to open Bloom the following week, but as I observed the frantic activity across the street through our front windows, I realized I had been thinking too small. If I truly wanted to make an impact, I needed to open the same night as Brandon's grand opening. Are you insane? Kelly questioned when I called her Tuesday evening with my updated timeline. You're talking about going from an empty space to full service in 48 hours. Technically, 60 hours, I corrected, glancing at my watch. And we're not doing full service. We're doing something better. I had been refining the concept all week, and what began as a simple pop-up restaurant had evolved into something more ambitious. Instead of trying to compete with Sterling Rose's polished luxury, Bloom would offer the one thing Brandon's operation couldn't: authenticity and innovation happening in real time. The next morning, I called every food critic, blogger, and influencer in Portland with a straightforward invitation. Come watch us cook. Rather than concealing our preparation in a closed kitchen, I was opening our doors Wednesday evening for what I termed a preview dinner. Guests could observe us preparing their meals, ask questions about ingredients and techniques, and essentially become part of the creative process. It was the kind of intimate educational experience that Brandon's formal dining room could never provide. Carlos was skeptical about the timeline, but excited about the concept. It's either going to be brilliant or a complete disaster, he said as we tested our final menu Tuesday night. Probably both, I admitted, plating a dish of roasted beets with herbed goat cheese and candied walnuts that highlighted 3 different local producers. But at least it will be memorable. By Wednesday afternoon, we had taken reservations for 30 people for our preview dinner, and Margaret's social media campaign had generated enough buzz that Portland Monthly decided to send a photographer. T-Stumps. Contrast with what was occurring across the street couldn't have been more pronounced. While Sterling Rose's staff scrambled in formal uniforms to manage last-minute crises, our team calmly prepped ingredients and set up our open kitchen space, where guests would witness every step of their meal preparation. The true test came when I spotted Brandon through our window, standing on the sidewalk with his phone pressed to his ear, clearly agitated about something. He glanced over at our space, noticed the activity, and I could see his expression shift from confusion to recognition to something resembling panic. 20 minutes later, his assistant entered Bloom with a takeout coffee, pretending to browse, while clearly scoping out our setup. I smiled and offered her a sample of our signature appetizer. "Please tell Mr. Whitmore we wish him luck with his opening," I said sweetly. The message was clear. I wasn't hiding, and I wasn't intimidated. Thursday. Evening arrived with crisp October weather that made Portland feel enchanting. Through our windows, I could see guests arriving at the Sterling Rose for Brandon's private opening party, and I had to admit, the scene looked impressive. Valets were parking luxury cars, photographers captured arrivals, and the soft lighting from inside the hotel made everything appear like a movie set. For a moment, I felt a pang of loss for what I had helped create and would never receive credit for. Then our first preview guests arrived, and everything changed. "This is incredible," said Janet Morrison, a food writer for The Oregonian, as she watched Carlos expertly break down a whole duck while explaining the sourcing story behind each component of the dish. "I've never seen anything quite like this. In Portland, our open kitchen concept was functioning exactly as I had hoped. Instead of the traditional restaurant experience where diners ordered from a menu and waited to be served, Bloom felt more like attending a sophisticated dinner party hosted by a professional chef. Margaret live-streamed portions of the evening on our social media accounts, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. People were commenting in real time, asking questions about techniques and ingredients, and requesting reservations for our official opening the following week. By 8 p.m., we were already fully booked for our first month of operation. But the real vindication came when I noticed familiar faces starting to appear among the crowd gathering outside our windows. 3 of Brandon's investors, people I had met while developing the Sterling Rose concept, were clearly more interested in what was happening at Bloom than in attending his private party across the street. One of them, a prominent local businesswoman named Victoria Brennan, even left Brandon's event and entered our space. "Jasmine, I had no idea you were doing this," she said, sampling our butternut squash soup with sage oil and pumpkin seed brittle. "This is extraordinary. It's everything I thought Sterling Rose would be, but with actual soul." Her comment was overheard by several other guests, including the photographer from Portland Monthly, and I realized the story was unfolding on its own. Social media posts from our preview dinner were garnering more engagement than Sterling Rose's official opening coverage, with food bloggers labeling Bloom the most thrilling addition to Portland dining in years. The evening reached its climax when Brandon himself appeared at our front door. I watched through the kitchen as he stood on the sidewalk, visibly debating whether to come inside. His formal opening party was still ongoing across the street, but the energy and excitement at Bloom were undeniable. After what felt like an eternity, he pushed open our door and walked directly to where I was plating desserts. "Jasmine," he said, his voice taut with a blend of anger and desperation, "we need to talk." The entire restaurant fell silent. Carlos paused his preparations. Our guests halted their conversations, and I could feel everyone watching to see how this confrontation would unfold. I looked up from the vanilla bean panna cotta I was garnishing, with fresh berries and honey, meeting Brandon's eyes for the first time since he had fired me. "I'm a little busy right now," I replied calmly, returning my focus to the dessert. "But if you'd like to make a reservation, we might have something. Available in about 6 weeks." The silence lingered for another moment before Brandon turned and walked out without another word. Through the windows, I watched him cross the street and vanish back into his own opening party. But the damage was already done. Everyone in Bloom had witnessed the exchange, and the story would spread throughout Portland's food scene by morning. The following morning brought an influx of media attention that surpassed even Margaret's most optimistic forecasts. The Portland Tribune featured a front-page story about the culinary David and Goliath unfolding on opposite sides of the same street, complete with photos from both opening events. Yet the social media response truly astonished me. Videos from our preview dinner were shared thousands of times, and food enthusiasts from Seattle to San Francisco were inquiring when they could visit Portland to experience Bloom. More importantly, the professional reaction was everything I had hoped for. Carlos received calls from 3 different restaurants trying to hire him, which he politely declined. 2 investors reached out to Margaret about expansion opportunities, and most surprisingly, I received a call from the executive chef at one of Portland's most prestigious restaurants, asking if I would be interested in collaborating on a special event. But the real validation came when Victoria Brennan contacted me directly. "Jasmine, I owe you an apology," she said. "I invested in Sterling Rose because I believed in the concept you presented to Brandon and me 6 months ago. After last night, it's evident that you were the visionary behind everything that made that project special." "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved by her honesty. "But I'm focused on Bloom now. That's actually why I'm calling. I'd like to discuss investing in your concept. What you've created has the potential to change how people perceive dining in Portland." As I hung up the phone, I realized my 3-month pop-up was rapidly transforming into something much larger. We had bookings extending into January, media, coverage that money couldn't buy, and most importantly, a team of individuals who shared my vision of what a restaurant could be when it prioritized community and authenticity over prestige and profit margins. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor, Brandon's head chef, the prestigious hire who had taken my place, Thomas Hartwell. A James Beard Award winner with an impressive background from restaurants in New York and Los Angeles, he appeared uncomfortable as he stood in our doorway. "I wanted to see what all the fuss was about," he remarked, his tone carefully neutral. As I showed him around Bloom, explaining our concept and introducing him to our team, I observed his expression transition from skepticism to genuine interest to what seemed like regret. "This is what I thought I was signing up for," he admitted, as we wrapped up the tour. "Brandon showed me your original concept and claimed it was his vision, but when I arrived, all the creativity and community connection had been stripped away. It's just another expensive restaurant now." His confession confirmed my suspicions. Brandon had leveraged my work to attract both investors and staff, then removed everything that made the concept exceptional once he had what he wanted. But Thomas's visit also sparked an idea that would become the final component of my revenge strategy. "Would you be interested in doing a guest chef collaboration?" I proposed. "You could cook your food the way you truly want to, and we could showcase what Sterling Rose could have been." The collaboration dinner, scheduled for the following month, sold out within hours of being announced. More importantly, it sent a clear message to Brandon and everyone else in Portland's food scene. The best people wanted to work with Bloom, not against it. As I locked up that evening and glanced across the street at Sterling Rose, I felt a satisfaction that transcended mere revenge. I had demonstrated that authenticity and vision could outweigh money and connections. I had built something that would outlast whatever petty gratification Brandon thought he had gained by firing me. 6 weeks after our opening, Brandon Whitmore stood in my restaurant for the second time. But this time, he wasn't the self-assured, dismissive man who had let me go. His shoulders were slumped, his expensive suit appeared disheveled, and dark circles under his eyes indicated sleepless nights and mounting pressure. The Sterling Rose, despite its lavish opening and esteemed pedigree, was struggling to fill even half its tables on weeknights, while Bloom had a 2-month waiting list and had been featured in 3 national food magazines. "Jasmine, please," he said, his voice stripped of its former arrogance. "I made a mistake. A huge mistake. I want to make this right." I continued plating the evening special, pan-seared halibut with parsnip puree and crispy Brussels sprout leaves, while he spoke. Carlos and our other team members pretended to focus on their own tasks, but I could tell they were listening closely. This was the moment we had all been anticipating, though none of us expected Brandon to appear so defeated. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked, not looking up from my work. "A partnership," he proposed. "You could run both restaurants, maintain the Bloom concept here, and redesign Sterling Rose the way you originally envisioned it. Your name would be on both doors, full creative control, and 50% ownership of the restaurant operations." The offer was generous. More than generous. It was everything I had wanted 8 months ago when I first signed on to create his restaurant. But as I surveyed Bloom, absorbing the warm laughter of our guests, the easy camaraderie among our staff, and the genuine excitement that filled the space each evening, I realized that what I had built was worth more than any partnership Brandon could offer. "I appreciate the offer," I said, finally meeting his gaze. "But I'm not interested." His face crumpled into a mix of surprise, desperation, and defeat. "Then what do you want?" "Name your price. I'll sell you the restaurant operation. Outright, if that's what it takes." I smiled, feeling a satisfaction that was both sweet and complete. "There's nothing you have that I want, Brandon. You taught me that the real value was never in the building or the investment capital. It was in the vision and the people who believe in it. And those belong to me now." 3 months later, the announcement appeared in the Portland Business Journal. The Sterling Rose Hotel was permanently closing its restaurant, unable to compete with the innovative dining concepts that had transformed the neighborhood. Brandon had quietly sold the hotel to a national chain that planned to convert the restaurant space into additional guest suites and a grab-and-go market. I read the news while sitting in what had once been Patricia's empty storefront and was now the permanent